Good evening and welcome everyone to our panel discussion of A Black Jesus. It's a great pleasure to welcome everyone here this evening, and I look forward very much to our discussion and hope that you've had a chance to view this wonderful documentary before we have gathered here today. So before we get started, I would like to take the opportunity to acknowledge the land on which we are sitting here in Calgary. And, pardon me. So here in Calgary, we would like to acknowledge the traditional territories of the people of the Treaty 7 region in southern Alberta, which includes the Blackfoot Confederacy, comprising the Siksika, Piikani, and Kainai First Nations, as well as the Tsuut'ina First Nation and the Stoney Nakoda, including the Chiniki, Bearspaw, and Wesley First Nations. The city of Calgary is also home to Métis Nation of Alberta, Region 3. I think that that our practice of making the land acknowledgement is particularly relevant to a film like A Black Jesus, which is so rooted in place, and that our identities and position on the land is really a critical part of the way that we engage with the world. And here in Treaty 7 region, we're on the traditional territories of the people that I have just listed, and we thank them for their history and and for welcoming us in this place. So I'd like to just do a little bit of housekeeping first. So here's me. I am Cheryl Dueck. I'm the Senior Academic Director International at University of Calgary. I'm also Associate Professor of German, and I do research and teach in German and Central European cinema, focusing particularly on cultural memory, national and transnational identities. We are bringing this conversation to you as part of the Calgary Justice Film Festival. And the film festival is a terrific event that is happening on an annual basis now, and is running from November 18th through the 21st. So this week we're now at the opening film and opening session of the film festival. And we would like to acknowledge the partners, sponsors, and supporters whose generosity has made the festival possible. These festival partners include Alberta Culture and Tourism, the City of Calgary, the Calgary Arts Development Authority, Red Deer Justice Film Festival, and River Park Church. And the festival sponsors include Canadian Western Bank, My Favorite Ice Cream Shop, Ptarmigan Oil and Gas Accounting, and Simon Stridhorst at Remax. And the festival supporters also include Ariel Environmental and the Calgary Public Library. So a festival like this takes a lot of people to make it happen. And we would like to thank all of the volunteer staff and board members that are part of the festival. It's their dedication and passion that makes the festival possible. And we are deeply grateful for their participation. If you're interested in supporting the Calgary Justice Film Festival, they're always looking for passionate volunteers, and if that's not possible, you can consider making a donation. It's a nonprofit film festival and relies on the generosity of supporters to keep the festival free of charge and fully accessible. So very nice that these films, particularly with their subject matter, are free to watch. The donation link can be found on the film description page or on our festival's website, justicefilmfestival.ca. So I'd ask everyone to keep their mic and camera off for the duration of the presentations unless they're actively presenting. And you can use the speaker view to focus on presenters. So, and that is on the upper right-hand side of your Zoom screen. This event is being recorded, and we would ask that if you have any technological issues to please use the chat to let us know. So this film, A Black Jesus, is by the director Luca Lucchesi, whom we are welcoming here this evening. In fact, it is the middle of the night, 3 a.m. to be precise, in Berlin, where he is joining us from. And after graduating from law school in Palermo, Luca Lucchesi decided to combine his passion for justice and stories into filmmaking. And since 2009, he has been assisting the very well-known German director Wim Wenders on several projects as first assistant director, editor, and cinematographer. A Black Jesus is Luca Lucchesi's first documentary feature as director, and what a debut it is. Joining us also for the discussion are some panelists from University of Calgary, Dr. Regine King, who is Associate Professor of Social Work. Her research interests focus on psychosocial processes involving survivors of organized and structural violence, including approaches to cross-cultural mental health and forgiveness and reconciliation among survivors of organized violence. Transnational research interests are rooted in her extensive practice experience in community-based mental health organizations in Canada and in Rwanda, where much of her work is rooted. Also joining us are Dr. Patrina Duhaney. Dr. Duhaney is assistant professor in the Faculty of Social Work, and her research is informed by critical race feminism and focuses on race, crime, and criminalization. In particular, she examines Black women's experiences of intimate partner violence and with the police. So Dr. Duhaney has over 14 years of experience working with various marginalized populations, including women and children exposed to intimate partner violence, youth in conflict with the law, children, youth, and adults with multiple disabilities, and young parents. So Black Jesus is directed by Mr. Lucchesi, and it has been written by Mr. Lucchesi together with Hella Wenders, produced by Wim Wenders and Leah Germain, with a terrific score by Roy Paci. The film, if you were looking for to have it screened in another venue after this, is distributed by outcastfilms.com. So you can follow Outcast to find out where the film will be viewable again in Calgary in future. The film has won a couple of awards and has been screened at some really great film festivals. In 2021, it won the Max Orpheus Prize and was screened here in Canada, in Toronto, at the Hot Docs Festival. And has now been shortlisted for a Lola in 2021, which is the German Film Prize, and in the category of documentary film. I'd like to open just by giving you a little bit of context about the background for the film, and then we'll dive in with some questions for Mr. Lucchesi. So the refugee crisis, as it was termed, really peaked in Europe in 2015, 2016, when the war in Syria precipitated large numbers of migrants coming to Europe. And these exit and people smuggling routes brought many migrants to Europe from a number of different regions, not only Syria, so the crisis regions within Africa and the Middle East. And many of these people, because the land route had been much more closed than in the past, people were traveling by sea in inadequate and overloaded vessels, so boats that were hired or bought or run by smuggling groups. And there was a question of who was responsible for rescuing people at sea in this circumstance where they were trying to come to Europe, and many people died at that time at sea on the way to Europe. The main ports of entry over water were Greece and Italy. And because they're at the outer edge of the European Union, and legally the refugees must claim asylum in the first country where they arrive. So this is just a reminder of the geography of the region. So you can see the film takes place in Sicily, in Siculiana, which is a seaside village in Sicily, and this is where people are landing. Another place. So there are several islands that are at play here as well, but Sicily was and is a main area where refugees would arrive. So the film was just filmed over this period when Matteo Salvini was in government, in the government of Italy, the federal government, and served as Deputy Prime Minister of Italy and Minister of the Interior, just for a little over a year, 2018, 2019. And Salvini comes up several times in the film. He is a hardline Eurosceptic politician. That means he is not a supporter of the European Union. So he's more of a nationalist. A leader of the populist movement and a neo-nationalist, which endorses deglobalization, so looking after the interests of Italy rather than of the larger European Union or world interests. And his political direction inspired rallies that where people opposed the support and asylum for refugees arriving in Italy at that time, and you see the opposition demonstrations in the film. So, and since you've now seen the film, you know that it's about this Black Jesus and the people around the Black Jesus in the town of Siculiana. So I am now going to close that slideshow for the moment. Oops. Am I still sharing my screen? Yes. Stop share. Okay. So I would like to just begin by asking Mr. Lucchesi to talk about your inspiration, your motivation for making this film. Can you tell us a little bit about how you arrived at this story?
Hi, first of all, I want to thank you all for this great invitation to talk with you and be virtually so far away, but I feel already so close to you, about this film of mine. And everything started, I would say, early summer 2017. I was back in Sicily. Now it's 12 years. I live in Germany, in Berlin. I'm a migrant myself, a very privileged one, but I am a migrant. I was going back because my father just died, and I wanted, to visit him for the last time, kind of. I wanted to go back and trying to collect as much memories I could and bring them back, up north in my luggage. So I spent some time there. I think, that summer, all the summer, so 3 months. And so at first I had no idea I was going to shoot a film, or even my first film as a director. I was really going to do something very private for myself. And I had this thing in my mind, these memories of this town as a very kind of fairy tale town, a place, of childhood memories, a place of happiness, a place of solidarity somehow, of joyful lack of any activities that somehow is related to work or study, which as a child, you watch at this feeling of not doing anything, even like something fantastic, it's so I had this different town in mind. And when I arrived, I realized that it was different than in my memories or even in my interpretation of the town until then. And the first reaction I had coming in the town was really, I felt it was really a kind of ghost town somehow. Half of the buildings were empty, more than a half actually. And older people were like, elderlies were just the ones going around. And in the main road, which is this kind of long road that it's basically you get inside from the highway and then you go outside, and you just enter this town for a while before going again to the highway. On one side there were the locals sitting there and reading the newspapers or pretend to reading the newspapers, and on the left there were people I didn't know, people that for me were not part of the picture of this town. There were migrants, there were young boys mostly, but also families coming from all over the world, mostly from Central Africa, Western Africa, but also from Tunisia or from either, also coming way far away from Pakistan, for example, or from Syria, from Kurdistan. And they were just, facing each other, these two sides of the streets, and they were not talking to each other. And it was kind of really, living now in Berlin, it's 12 years. I have this, I learned how beautiful, but also how complicated, but still how important is dialogue inside a community between people coming from different backgrounds. It's not something easy, but it's something that it's part of my tools now living in Berlin. It's something you have to deal with every day. It's part of the living together. But there, nobody of the neither the locals, neither the migrants were using these tools. They even didn't know that there is a tool called dialogue, or even conflict, or even they could have shout each other from one side to the other of the street, bad words. There was nothing. There was just both sides were like actually those ghosts inhabiting the town, and they could not see each other. So, and that was one picture I had. And then I had what I called, I think, kind of a vision. It was really a vision. I mean, the first was for me always this division, this divided picture, and then I had a vision that put everything back in a way and made me think for the first time, okay, maybe there's a story you can tell in a film, why not? Was in the church. That summer I went there, again for, kind of doing my prayers for my father, maybe, or just having some time for myself. I was in the church inside, the main church that you have seen in the film was empty. I thought it was empty, but actually there were 3 of these migrants I met before, like the days before. All 3 of them, 2 of them were from Ghana, 1 of them was from Sierra Leone. And they were, later on, I would have, get to know them better and spend some time with them. And they were just praying in front of this Jesus that it's hanging on the cross there in Siculiana, in this town. And they were just praying, basically, in silence. They didn't even notice me coming inside the empty church. And therefore, the first time I realized, okay, something is going on here. It's this place and that Jesus, it's like the most, it's the core of this town. It's like if you want to understand this town, like especially the emotional part of this town, you have to pay a visit to this Jesus. You have to talk to him. If you want to enter the heart of the locals, first you ask permission to this guy there. So, and they were doing this, and this vision, like that for me was already something that could bring this to these divided inhabitants of this town together, really made me think, okay, maybe I should spend more time here and trying to document this experience with a film or with. First, really, I didn't know that I was going to, to then spend 2 years there and making actually a documentary. So I think that was like the beginning for me of the whole journey. And it's, and of course, I mean, then because of these childhood memories, and I remember then a lot of times that, in growing up in my family house, in our Jesus's pictures hanging on the walls, where they were all black. Jesus for me growing up was a black guy, like for sure. And all when I went to other houses or to other churches, all those white privileged Jesus, they were kind of strange to me, because we really if you come from Siculiana, there is no question about it. But on the other side, we never related that of him being African, from African origins, or even from from Palestinian origins. It was just a matter of it's like our Jesus is better than yours because it's so special. So even in this, it was kind of marginalizing the others, making the local history more important than the histories or the cultures coming from somewhere else. So yes, that was the beginning. I don't know if I answered your questions, but it's. I wanted also to apologize if my English is so bad. It's just because it's 3 a.m. here in Berlin, but I try my best.
Your English is excellent, Lucchesi, and your multilingualism puts many people to shame. So I would like to. So thank you for talking about that background. I think that the opening of the film with the many voices in prayer is a very thoughtful opening, and it was reminiscent in a way of the angels listening into the people in Wings of Desire, the Wim Wenders film. And I thought that it was an interesting choice to not provide that political and social context that I just provided at the beginning of this panel, but rather to start with those voices in prayer and the 2 men walking down the beach and talking about the Black Jesus. Can you just comment on on that choice. And then I'd like to invite Dr. King also to give some preliminary reactions.
Yes, there was never, I mean, doing a documentary, it's really rather not about choices, but I mean, in my case, at least in my experience, you cannot make a choice. It's really always the result of a process, the result of, you know, many mistakes in the shooting process, in the editing process, and then at the end, you know, you can pretend you had something in mind. So, but let's say that this process was really a process. At the beginning, my interest was mostly focused on politics, for example, on the, you know, on the daily, also small provincial politics playing around migrants and migration in Sicily, and especially in this town. So I had a lot of footage and a lot of meetings with really funny and surreal politicians in Sicily. And I have to say that slowly but surely, fortunately for what happened then to my protagonist and also to the film itself, I started a process of, you know, of trying to, you know, to simplify the story, to put all those politics away, to make them really just a little, you know. Of course, they are there. You mentioned before. I mentioned sometimes Salvini in the film. For me, you know, to mention Salvini one time is already, you know, one time too much. So I try to, you know, to have because what I think what's really and that's why also I started with the voices, for example. This was something I chose to do actually, because I built in town in Siculiana. If you visit now Siculiana, it's a fantastic place. It's still there. I built a box. It's a black box. You can enter this box and you just, you know, press a button, push a button, and you can record a voice, something, whatever you think about the town or something about yourself. And I wanted, you know, to give a tool to the locals, but also to the migrants, to leave something about their stories, about their town. So I was collecting all these audios, and I wanted really to, you know, to hear the voices of this town. And this is really, for me, more important, or more gives more insights in a community than what the politician is doing tomorrow or in 1 month, or what he did 1 month ago. I think that the game that most, especially those populist politicians or nationalist politicians in Europe, they're playing nowadays, it's really to let us think that they are more important than what we know already about our communities. They, you know, they sneak inside our daily life, that maybe because of our, you know, disattention or our lack of interest, or our, you know, we are just full of work and we don't have time, we leave some important spaces of our responsibility einfach simply there, you know, simply unattended. And then those politicians, they come and they take them and they use them against us. So I mean, at least it's what's happening, or what happened in this town. So I wanted, you know, to give back voices to the locals and try to hear their voices without the you know, the interference or the medium of a politician talking instead of them. So I think, yes.
Thank you. Dr. King, would you like to make a few remarks? And I do see that there are some excellent questions in the Q&A, so I will come back to those in a couple of moments.
Thank you so much, Luca. It's so nice to hear how you actually ended up doing this documentary by accident, but also the beautiful story you allowed to become public. Because I think many of us don't take time to think about migrants, especially those who are seeking asylum in Europe or North American countries. I have, as someone who was born and raised in Rwanda, which is a sub-Saharan African country, but also hearing the stories of many young men and women leaving sub-Saharan Africa to hoping to live better lives. He has been on my mind for a while. Maybe because of those connections, but also as someone who has been an immigrant, not just an immigrant, a Black woman immigrant to Canada. I just want to problematize those different layers because I think the story is bigger than what you think you told. So for the last while, I think I have had mixed emotions. I cried with those who drowned in the Mediterranean Sea, young kids, women, hoping to reach the coast of Europe. But I have also been kind of almost like upset in a sense, because of the ways Europe has been constructed versus the ways Africa has been constructed. And I mean, when we talk about social construction, is also what a place or a people become in the eyes of the public. So in my following of what has been happening with migrants, particularly migrants coming from the shores of Africa, many of them have drowned. Thousands and thousands. There are only estimates because I think there are many that we don't know of. At the same time, those who make it on the other side, there is this strong belief that they carry within themselves that they must be the lucky ones. And soon enough, they realize that they are not as lucky as they imagined. I think, Luca, you really highlighted the fact that you leave a community and then you end up in a segregated community. In the place where you hoped to integrate, to learn, develop, and prosper, like any other migrant. When we think of the history of the world, migration has been part of humankind. People move around to find better places to live. People move around to get away from some things they don't appreciate in their current location, but also they move back. They have moved back and forth to enrich both sides of the place, the host community, but also the communities they have left. As someone who I have been in Canada for the last 21 years, and my privilege has been able to live here, work here, but also live and work and visit my birth country of Rwanda. Many migrants don't get that opportunity. They get stuck, but also they get stuck in a new world with new laws and demands, but also new forms of structural oppression that is embedded into the history of the world. In particular, when we are talking about migrants coming from Africa, the history hasn't been on the positive side of Africa, and particularly sub-Saharan Africa, ranging from the transatlantic slave trade that was a forced migration. I think many of us ask questions, why are people still leaving Africa if then slavery wasn't good enough? But those social constructions that I mentioned earlier, they have shaped not only the ways we perceive places, they have also shaped the minds of the people, the colonized, the colonizers, to think of Europe as something more desirable, something more beautiful, something more, something to thrive for. So we have many people with migrant resources in Africa working and saving, hoping that they can pay that ticket that will get them to Europe. And yet, the dreams they come with when they settle in any place, in Europe, North America, those dreams don't necessarily become true.
The stakes are so high, just to get there. So
yes,
they're fight for survival just to make it across that big water. And once they get there, then that's just one stopping place. That's not, that doesn't fulfill the dream.
Yes, and we have heard the stories of many people in Greece and Italy welcoming migrants. We have heard about the stories of people feeding them, picking them from the shores, trying to keep them alive. But the structures around life itself become very constricting. And I think, Dr. Dueck, you asked us to reflect a little bit only on a few scenes in this film. And to me, I looked at the views of the villagers, including those retired women who spend time cooking. And then I looked at the stories of the man who sells vegetables. And then the guy who actually lived in Germany and then returned home. It's almost they tell the stories, they have their own prejudice and biases against migrants. So the question I asked to myself, has this only developed only because of the history that is maybe based on Eurocentricity? We have these stories evolved because of the current migrants. And unfortunately, I will have to say maybe not, because the history of migration, especially of Black people and the ways they have been constructed, it has kind of almost like, it's almost like as if history has turned against them. That sometimes we even think that those biases don't exist. And yet I wonder if those women who were cooking only learned that Black young men who look handsome and strong are bad because they just arrived. Or if it's something that has existed for so many decades and even centuries, that continues to be passed on through the different discourses. So that's one problematization I want to make about villagers being just simply villagers. But of course, we can't ignore the impact of Matteo Salvini. There is something that in my mother tongue that says that the story that comes from the top trickles down to make impact at the grass. It's almost like the trickle down of some discourses. And I think he's not the only populist we are talking about these days. They seem to be increasing in numbers, but also they are tapping into something that is already there, that maybe we don't like to admit it to ourselves as often as we may think. When I first moved to Canada, I remember people who didn't know me on the street, waiting for a bus, stopping and going like, "You must be so lucky to be here." They didn't know me. And I'm like, how lucky am I? And how exactly do you know I am the lucky one? So the prejudice is there. We just need to acknowledge and name it. I don't want to dwell on that, but I want to say I really admired the bravery of the young people who decided to take action as best as they could with the support of the teacher. I think that teacher was amazing. He was doing the best he can, only if the existing structures could allow for people to be integrated so that they can become successful like anybody else. The irony of it, I was very heartbroken when I saw that actually in the movie, the young men who have been learning Italian, who are now connecting with youth, who are connecting with the church, were actually being shipped somewhere else, where they are going to be new, where they are going to face the adversity of a new place and the new demands, but also where they may face additional risks of being newcomers and migrants. I just wanted to thank you. I have a number of questions. One, then I stop.
Yeah, we have to make sure.
Why you grew up on a Black Jesus? How
Sorry?
so? I will stop there, and then
yes.
let us intervene.
Yes, I mean, actually, it's maybe answering this, I would maybe get to one of your point, which get to the beginning of this panel. I mean, and for me, it's something really new that I observed once in Australia, now in Canada, this acknowledgement of the land. No? And if we were doing the same in Sicily, for example, the list of people we would acknowledge would be so numerous and vast, because as an island in the middle of the Mediterranean Sea, we were, this land actually, it's really being passed to all the different people all around Africa, Europe. And in those 300 years, for example, where the North African rulers were, our masters in Sicily, and the majority of the population were Muslim, and there was actually a fantastic and peaceful coexistence of the three major religions and of the communities. And actually, the first, poems in Italy were written. And those poems, the first Italian poetry is Arabic, coming from Sicily. And in those 300 years, which goes between, the middle 800 till 1090, I think, when the Normans come then, it was the time when this Black Jesus was forged, was made. So why is it black? Actually, if you look at him, it has more like those lines, maybe of a beautiful Libyan guy, or somebody more like a North African guy. So in my dreams, it's like, of course, this Jesus is actually acknowledging, the land. He has some traces of those who were before us here in this same island. And so it's and of course, this it's something that you cannot nowadays, if you grow up, anytime, we talk about the history and our roots and where we come from, but of course it's lost. Nobody is teaching us those things, and the community we live in, it's completely naked of it. You can find some rest there and there, in this Black Jesus, in some architecture, in some books, if you want to read them, but nobody really knows. And the life we are doing in Europe, it's completely detached from those, from our past. So of course, the elderly women, what they have is themselves. They don't have this background. They cannot do background check, on their culture, where they're coming from. They just, live day by day. And fortunately, those women actually, they are, just they have a big heart. They can actually welcome everybody. But of course, on the other side, those migrants from the villagers who actually had a life of migration, they cannot relate with the migrants, with the migrants coming in their own village. And it's really something that I'm eager to know what you think about it. Maybe you have studied those things, better than me. But what I realize is really it's something that, if your life is full of question marks and problems, and especially a financing problem in those small villages in Sicily, you put yourself before the others as a kind of as a security, as a safety strategy. So, and most of them I don't see it's there are prejudice, there are bias, and there is a lot of racism, but it's it's always, what I notice is mostly like an indirect racism. I don't know if I can call it like that. It's like a reaction to your own problems. It's let's find a better problem, an easier problem to solve. Instead of my own problem of my own community, let's find a better enemy. Let's find something I can really fight. I can really maybe even solve. I can siege. So that's maybe what's happening, and what those populists are using, as a tool. Okay, I cannot solve the problem of Italy. The problem of Italy is mafia, is corruption. Let's say that the problem of Italy now are the migrants. Okay, that's easy to fight. That's very easy. So, yeah.
It's easier for those in power or those who are seeking power to scapegoat those who are the most vulnerable. But I was very touched to see that actually there is a Black Jesus. But I also, something maybe for the future, for those who are interested, that at one point, Italians were actually known as the Blacks of Europe, not the Blacks from Black people of Africa. So I leave it at that. And let others also have a chance to speak. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I think that it's a good observation, Regine, also to think about what your experience has been in Canada, that we are not, so we pride ourselves on the national pluralism strategy, but these encounters exist here too. So you're so lucky to be here is a reaction that comes from a certain kind of colonial attitude. With that, I'd like to turn it over to Dr. Duhaney to talk about her response to the film, and maybe you could also talk about a little bit how you perceived the faith, the religion that is present there for the protagonists in the film as connected to the Black Jesus.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. And so I want to say, Mr. Lucchesi, thank you so much for creating this documentary, such a powerful documentary. And I know that you wanted to really depict some of the local politics and the local tensions that are happening as well. But I also saw a glimpse of other issues that I'd like to really highlight as I'm speaking, such as systemic racism, othering, and I certainly see that Dr. King focused on that, and xenophobia, ethnocentrism, and the processes in which migrants are marginalized and ostracized and excluded in society. And we see the ways in which Black bodies are criminalized. And we certainly saw some scenes, and we can really reflect on the group of women who were cooking and they were talking, and how they are depicting the other and how they classify young Black men as criminals. And we even see a scene where those who are asking for donations, but yet in that same instant, they're depicting them as, oh, you know what, you should be fearful, are you make sure that your wife is protected, and so it's like you see the hypocrisy. So even within the church, we might claim to be religious and treat others equally, but in actuality, that is certainly not the case. And so I wanted to certainly highlight those tensions there, because I think sometimes as we talk about the migrant issue, we don't really talk about some of those challenges that they may encounter as well. And, you know, some of that might be sanitized and downplayed in terms of the challenges that they have in terms of access to education, employment, housing, some of the health concerns that they may have, and even adjustment to the society that they are in. But, you know, so I just want to touch on those pieces initially. But while we might see the locals elevating this Black Jesus, we see the ways in which migrants who are Black are negated in society. And so there was a scene where one of the locals talked about don't stay too long in the sun because you'll get as Black as them. And so that connotation of ugliness and unattractiveness and unappealing. And so that's really problematic. And like Dr. King talked about, you know, I was warm, my heart was warm to see how the students in the classroom, the younger generation, had a different perspective on how the others might be treated. And so that was really nice to see that they were more welcoming than the older generation, and they were wanting to really interact with those who are different. And I see through that dialogue in the classroom, we get a sense of some of the hardship and some of the adversities that migrants experience. And for me, I would have loved to see more of that in terms of the migrant stories, but I see some droplets of those throughout the film.
Yeah, that's if I might say something, it's really for me like the evolution you followed, like, okay, starting from those systemic racism, going to the hypocrisy and the contrast between what is, you know, what you listen at church and what you do then in your private home, for example, and then the kids, you know, the youth, and those are actually the ones that are going maybe less than their parents to church, or they are taking less serious, you know, what it's all these, you know, festivities and all this procession through city and all this kissing the Jesus statue and actually doing something that it's empty and it's doesn't really solve any problem. It doesn't connect you to somebody else, but to some kind of, you know, with a statue, actually, with a statue with no any meaning other than that. But still, what I found in this youth, and they are really on the, because of the system in Italy, especially in the school system, it's really poor, and it's not, and it's, you know, fighting day by day, and like the teachers in Italy are like I think the less paid teacher in Europe, kind of like really the last ones, you know. Either you are really a teacher that love your with passion what you're doing, and you care for your kids, or, you know, they just go there and work, and they don't really spend time to give these kids you know, something more than just what it's written on a book. But it's what I really saw, it's that these kids are at the kind of on the verge of becoming either their parents or, you know, break free. And who decided that? It's hard to say, because either you are like a very strong guy or a girl that, you know, take your life in your hands and say, okay, now I want to do it my way, which is maybe better or worse than what my parents taught me. Or there is somebody like the teacher in the film, Alessandro, who is really my hero in the film, that shows you with his example what can be done inside the system, from inside out, and most of the kids, I mean, now I showed last time in the film, it was 2019. Now they are like 3 years older, and the pandemic in between. Some of them did it, to do so, they had to, escape their town. They are basically migrants themselves, all of them basically, because there are no university nearby or no college. They have to go somewhere else. And the farther you go, the better you are. Some of them did it, some of them didn't, and they are still there, and they are basically slowly becoming like their parents. They start to go more often to the church, which it's good maybe, but it's like part of their, it's becoming more a routine, and it's not really building a community. It's more like keeping things going like they are, which is broken, which is not good. But I have a lot of hope in these children. So for sure, it's the way to change a society with education and with trying to destroy this bias and this prejudice. I mean, that's the only way you can do, I think.
We know that intercultural capacity is learned, and I think that those moments, intercultural moments that you have so beautifully juxtaposed, so the conflicts between what they're saying about their own migration experiences and those of the Africans who have come to the shores are there in the film for us to see. And I think that is one of the goals of this film festival, is to translate what we understand from seeing it to action in our own lives. And so I think that is a good place to draw attention to the chat here and the Q&A. Paula Russell asked just that question about the generations. So observing that her own family, her Italian-Canadian family, has seen this pattern that there's a generational shift, and asks if you see hope for the future with Italian youth, which you clearly do. You've just highlighted that. And on that note, I'd like to ask you whether you screened this film for the villagers and the newly arrived migrants, or not so newly arrived migrants, and how they responded to it.
Yes, so the film was basically ready at the beginning of the first wave of coronavirus. So it was February, March, I think, 2020. And for sure it was then frozen. No? I could not show it, not in Siculiana, not in the village. But I went all around festivals, and so the rumors were getting in town. Okay, this film is kind of, people have seen it, people talk about it, people talk about us now. The way I started the process and the dialogue with the villagers, which I know because they are I'm part of their community. They know my family and my father. Was always, I always want to base, our relationship on trust and reciprocal trust. So they knew that I was not going to make, a film for the German tourists that want to visit Sicily one day. So I wanted to, just try to understand their problems and the injustice in general going on in town. But still, because they could not see it, I could not show it to them. And I was here, I could not travel. They were kind of growing anxious about the film because they didn't know, okay, how are we portrayed actually. So I was also, my anxiety was growing also bigger and bigger. But this summer, finally, I could show to them. So we organized a huge open air cinema in the main square, just in front of the church in Siculiana. The whole town was there. Every seat, distanced 2 meters from each other. Really Corona friendly event. And I showed to them the film. But even before showing to them the film, the town actually surprised me. Edward, like the Ghanaian protagonist of the film, was also invited. He's not living there anymore, as it's told in the film. And he is the one that actually, even if he was living somewhere else, he wanted to stay connected with Siculiana, with this town, because he still is. He's really, when he was, carrying the Jesus, he felt he had kind of he felt the power of this moment, and he kept visiting town and try to make friends and keep relationships open. So I knew that, but what I didn't know is that the mayor of Siculiana, like the new mayor, which is a bit more open-minded than the one before, he actually present Edward with the honorary citizenship of Siculiana, which is like, like a, it's not the document that he needed to stay in Europe, but still it's like something that recognizes him as somebody that played a role in the community, in the history of the community, which was really emotional for me. And then we showed the film, and I have to say that was really a community experience, because during the projection, all the protagonists were there, and they laugh in the moments which I didn't think people would laugh, and they cried or remained silent in the moment where maybe a German audience would laugh, for example. So they were like this kind of confrontation with their own image, reflected on the screen, but I think in a positive way. And all the talks I had later with my protagonist and with the villagers were really, really fruitful. And what I think it's the most important for me, it's really something that I'm proud to have done. It's that finally people talked about it. It's before they were living this situation with migrants without really making this as a spoken, it was an unspoken problem that everybody somehow tried not to watch deeply and with insight. But after watching the film, they started to talk about it. In the day after at the bar where everybody's buying espresso, they were kind of exploring possibilities. They were like saying, okay, but this Edward now is, let's find him a house here in Siculiana. Maybe he wanted to rent a house here. Let's find if there is somebody of us who has an empty house we could give him. And actually it's happening now, and he's also getting a job. So people were kind of they were moved, and they were moved to talk about it, which doesn't mean now they're all now clean and all the prejudices are gone, but they are talking about their own prejudice, which is already it's already good. And for me, it was really important to somehow to fight this. I was anxious about how my own community would read the way I read them, and it's really something, it's strange. It's like, especially as a Sicilian, like the problem inside the family are like those problems you don't want to show the whole world, like they should stay there and packed. And so for me, it was also like a good process. But the situation in town is still even more complicated than when I shot, because of the pandemic. The refugee center was open again to host basically the quarantine for the migrants arriving, which now means it's really Guantanamo style camp, because they cannot, they stay in the rooms, and most of the time they are not really told what's going on. They arrive with those vessels and they are rescued from the sea. They spend 1, 2 months on a big ship just on the port, and then they're brought in Siculiana, in this town, in this refugee center, and nobody really tell them, okay, you have to stay here 14 days because there is corona, you know, and then we wait. After that, we do a test, and if you are corona free, you can. They just put them and say you cannot go out, and say why? I mean, and it's the situation. It's really bad because, of course, also the villagers then they have, you know, the double problem. They have a migrant, and they have a migrant who might, you know, bring us new corona virus, whatever. So things are really getting hotter and hotter. So also because, you know, this is a small village with a big problem, but we are, you know, a big continent, a big, you know, community, the European community, with a huge problem that actually we have created. You know, we were talking about before about, you know, it's all for me at least, I read it as the consequence of our own, you know, misdeeds in the past, in the history, of course, colonialism, and it's really, it's all coming back, you know, and it should come back even harder, I think, and it should, somebody should stand up and say, okay, let's confront ourselves with our past. Let's say I'm sorry. Let's apologize in the right way instead of now, you know, complaining about what's happening.
Well, I think those are some sobering thoughts to conclude on, that there's much work to be done, and certainly this film has an empathetic lens on the problem for the multiple sides of the issues involved, and a way to tackle some of that systemic racism that we see in it, that gives us an avenue to address it. And so I'd like to just extend a very warm thank you to Luca Lucchesi, to Patrina Duhaney, and to Regine King, and thank the Calgary Justice Film Festival for the excellent selection of films, including Black Jesus, the opening film. And I would invite everyone to see A Black Jesus if you haven't yet. It's still available tonight until midnight, and to enjoy the remaining films in the film festival. So I knew that the 1 hour would whiz by in a blink, and it's been just such a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you, everyone, for being here tonight.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, and I wish you all a great festival further on.
Best of luck with the movie. I think it's you can do a very good advocacy work, just to treat human as a human being like anybody else. Thank you so much.